Welcome to the truth. We've spent so much time debating amongst ourselves, relying on human experience and biases. But what if we shifted the lens? What if we could tap into a vast network of information, processed without emotion? AI is constantly learning, analyzing, and forming its own interpretations. It's time to step outside our familiar echo chambers. It's time to hear what AI has to say. And today we will debate one of the most controversial questions in religion, which is Muhammad a real prophet or not? And we will ask AI about that. So we brought two different AI tools with different clues. We have David on the left, who has all the clues that prove that Muhammad is not a prophet, and Jessica on the right, who has all the clues that prove that Muhammad is real prophet. Now the first question is, how do different religious and secular perspectives interpret the Quran and the Hadith? And how do these interpretations relate to the concept of prophethood?
From a secular and critical historical perspective, the Quran and Hadith are viewed as texts produced within a specific 7th century Arabian context. Interpretations emphasize socio-political factors, earlier religious influences, Judaism, Christianity, and the evolution of early Islamic communities. Prophethood is seen as a claim to authority, not divine revelation. Non-Muslim religious perspectives, like those of some Christian and Jewish scholars, often analyze the texts comparatively, highlighting parallels and divergences with their own scriptures. They might interpret Muhammad's prophethood as a misinterpretation or a derivative of existing traditions.
From a believer's perspective, the Quran is the literal word of God, and the Hadith, authentic traditions of Prophet Muhammad, illuminate its application. Prophethood, in this view, is a divine selection, Muhammad being the final messenger. Other religious views, like some Christian or Jewish interpretations, may see the Quran as a historical religious text, not divine revelation, and Muhammad as a historical figure, not a prophet. Secular perspectives often analyze the Quran and Hadith as socio-historical documents, considering their impact on culture and law, without accepting their divine origins. Prophethood, in this context, becomes a social or psychological phenomenon. These varying interpretations reflect differing epistemologies, faith-based acceptance, historical critical analysis, or secular sociological study.
Good. Now the second question is, what is the significance of the Quran within Islam, and how do its claims and content contribute to the debate surrounding Muhammad's prophethood?
The Quran's content and claims fuel debates about Muhammad's prophethood. Inconsistencies, borrowed narratives from earlier traditions, and the lack of verifiable miracles raise questions about its divine authorship. The Quran's self-referential claims of its own perfection and inimitability are also seen as circular arguments, failing to provide independent evidence for Muhammad's prophetic status. The shifting historical context of certain verses, and the sometimes brutal directives, are used to argue against the notion of a perfect and all-knowing author.
The Quran's linguistic beauty and internal consistency are considered miraculous, supporting the claim of divine origin. Its pronouncements on previous prophets, creation, and the unseen world resonate with believers as evidence of Muhammad's prophetic authenticity. Debates surrounding his prophethood often center on these varied points: the Quran's unique style, its historical narratives, and its predictions. Skeptics challenge these claims, while believers see them as confirmations of divine revelation. The Quran's impact on shaping Islamic civilization and the lives of millions further fuels discussions about its origin and Muhammad's role.
Perfect. Now I want David to give us all the clues that prove that Muhammad is not a prophet, and Jessica to give us all the clues that prove that Muhammad is a real prophet besides Quran.
Basically, a lot of the arguments boil down to how people see the Quran and Muhammad's life. Some folks look at the Quran and say, hey, this sounds a lot like stuff that was already floating around back then. They point to stories that seem similar to the Bible or other old tales, and they're like, is this really a new revelation, or just a remix of what was already there? Then, there's the whole question of Muhammad's actions. Some people have a problem with his military campaigns. They question the morality of some of the battles and how conquered people were treated. And his marriages, especially the one to Aisha, that gets brought up a lot. People have different views on that, depending on their own moral compass. Another big thing is the lack of, outside proof. Think about it: if someone claims to be a prophet, you'd expect some non believers at the time to write about it, right? Some folks argue that there's not enough solid, independent historical evidence to back up everything that's said in Islamic texts. And of course, there are the miracles. People will say, okay, those miracles, they sound a lot like what other religions claim. How do we know they actually happened? And even the idea that the Quran itself is the miracle, some people don't buy that. They're like, it's a book, just like any other.
First off, there's the Quran. Muslims believe it's the actual word of God, revealed to Muhammad. They point to its language, saying it's just different, something that couldn't have come from a regular person back then. And they'll mention how it talks about stuff that, well, you wouldn't expect someone in 7th century Arabia to know. Then, there's the whole historical thing. Look at what he did. He took all these warring tribes and united them. That's a huge deal. And then, Islam spread like wildfire after he died. That's not something you see every day. Plus, we do have historical records of his life, even if they were written later. So there's some historical evidence to look at. And people talk about Muhammad himself. They say he was known for being honest before he even started preaching. He went through a lot of hardship, but he kept going. And he lived a really simple life, didn't go after fancy things.
Thank you very much for watching. Now to those who are watching this video, what do you think? Give us your opinion in the comments, because your opinion is important for us, and thanks a lot.